I just got done with ESL 1 Manila a few days ago, and ESL 1 Manila was the first premier tournament to feature professional Tricasting. So I promised when I got back I was going to do a vlog on it. I haven't done a vlog in a while, so I figured this would be a pretty good topic to breach. First of all, I want to make a distinction about Tricasting. I put an emphasis there on professional Tricasting because of the fact that people oftentimes point to the Summit as featuring tri or even quadcasting, but I think that really isn't professional Tricasting in the traditional sense, that is being able to get a lot of pros together and have them essentially relax and talk about the game, but that's not something that is going to be oftentimes the focus on the premier tournament. So I know a lot of people are going to point to that, but I think that is something that is its own beast that is very unique to the Summit or other tournaments like it. And I think it's that anything you take from that is just not really going to apply to most professional casting. So to get in on a little bit, I think that this is a good topic to talk about because it's been a pretty divisive one from what I've read. Because we were looking for constant feedback while we were at that tournament, at least I was quite a bit, to figure out what people liked and did not like about the Tricast, and it did seem to be pretty divisive. Some people really thought that this is going to be the future of commentary for Dota 2, while others didn't like it. They thought it was unnecessary and too problematic. One person I would probably point to would be Nahaz, Alan. I know Alan was really excited for Tricast. It was something that we had kind of talked about before. Myself, I'm a little hesitant about Tricasting, but I think with the right makeup, you can definitely make it work. Alan definitely seemed very enthusiastic about Tricasting and thought that this is where we should be pushing forward in the future. Whereas people like Blitz, prior to ESL 1 Manila, had a lot of reservations about Tricast and felt like they couldn't really work very well in Dota 2. There are some exceptions to that. I mean, Blitz, for example, is the one who wanted me, him, and Jacob to do Tricasts. We did a couple of those in the studio, just to kind of, I think, feel things out and figure out whether or not it was really viable, and I think it went pretty okay. It was just for a couple of online matches. Essentially, we were able to hang out and relax and talk about the game. It wasn't a whole lot of hype to it. It wasn't something that was attempted to be very professional. It was meant to be something that was a lot more relaxed. So we kind of tried that out, but I think Blitz was pretty hesitant about the idea of Tricast overall within Dota. Part of the problem is, I'm not so sure about Tricast being the future of Dota 2 casting. Part of the problem being that having Tricast in Dota is that Dota is simultaneously a very intensive and strategic game with a lot of things to break down, while still holding high amounts of action with no obvious breaks. That's one of the big problems, is that Dota doesn't have clear timeouts. Sometimes you have periods of lull, but you can't really tell when you're going to be snapping out of that into a lot of action. So it doesn't have some very defined break periods that would make it a lot easier for Tricast. So a lot of people will point towards League of Legends. One of the things that I read and both heard from community members and various like random Reddit comments and stuff was that people looked at other games and saw Tricast and wondered, why doesn't Dota 2 have this when there's so much to break down? For example, League of Legends, people would oftentimes point towards League of Legends as being within the same genre and having Tricast for pretty much all their important matches, and Dota does not. But part of the problem being that League of Legends, while maybe in the same genre, has significantly less action, which allows you a large amount of space for two different analysts to be able to get everything that they want to talk about out there. While Dota is a lot more action to talk about, a lot more action for the play-by-play to cover, and there are individual strategic things that need to follow after that action is called, and there's oftentimes not a space for two analysts to talk about that. So That's one part of the problem. Another part of the problem is I kind of highlighted earlier, which is people would point towards CSGO as being like the premier spectator esports right now that everybody's watching, and they have Tricast in their finals. But part of the problem is that the Tricast work in CSGO because there's natural high and low periods with very distinct break periods. They actually have timeouts within the game where the third caster is able to come in and analyze. So, for example, you take a look at Moses as being the third caster within the Anders and Similar duo cast. That works really well oftentimes because he comes in during the timeouts or during the small intervals between rounds where he's able to come in and get out his analysis, and then Anders and Semler will take it for the most part when the round is in full swing. So Dota just doesn't have that. It is constantly flowing. There is no easy break period of time for a third analyst to be able to come in. Now, there are certain pros to Tricast. I think that being able to have double analysts or even an extra color person to fill the air when the game slows down can actually help out the commentary quite a bit. It's just a problem of that only works when the game is slow, and you never know whether or not a game is going to be slow until you're into it. As well as a third caster can actually add to the hype, giving certain dynamics. Now, the dynamics being, I actually quickly threw this up. Yes, I am very professional. Look at this, I use paint. The dynamics being, I kind of thought about it, I was thinking about it during ESL 1 Manila, and looking back on it, these are the 4 different Tricasts that I think are most viable at a professional level. So we're going to start with what I think is the easiest and simplest one. But that being said, easy and simple does not necessarily mean that that this is where we want to see Tricast go, if this is going to be something that is used more in the future. So we're going to start with the play-by-play, color, and analysis. So this is a separation of the 3 different casters. You have a pure play-by-play caster, you have a pure color caster, and a pure analytical caster. So play-by-play, for example, would be someone like, when I refer to pure play-by-play, I'm going to be referring to people like Owen, OD Pixel, Toby, as well as AC. Those guys are pure play-by-play, and that is their sole focus of the cast. And in duo cast, while they may try and branch out into, trying to do a little bit of analysis or setting up some conversation with their casters, their best trait is very clearly just straight play-by-play. So in Tricast, you can actually let this person be his own individual being. So that's why he's just a full-up circle. Same goes with the color commentator. That's going to be someone like Sir Action Slacks or Pyrian Flax, who I think could work into Tricast. I think the Slacks Purge Owen Tricast is the one that I kind of modeled this one after. That being able to have someone like Slacks in there for when the game slows down, just the general idea is being able to create what we refer to as color within the commentary, or something that drives the conversation but isn't analytics. So it can be sometimes just something that's humorous to talk about. It can be some context around the match or the tournament or things like that. And then you have the analysis caster, which was what Purge was doing, which was playing more of the dry role where he's there to just break down the game. So Owen calls the action. After the action is had, Purge further breaks down that action by exploring some of the analytics of what went into having that clash. And then when the game slows down, you have your color commentator come in and fill up some air as well. Essentially, the color commentator is kind of a backup in some ways, where he only really comes in when he's needed, when there is an action and when there isn't a whole lot of analysis to break down. The problem with this Tricast is that you are very segmented in your roles, and there is not a whole lot of flow to it. It's easy because there is so much division between the various roles. It's like, okay, first it's Owen's turn, then it's Purge's turn, then it's Slax's turn, and it just kind of repeats like that ad infinitum, just because of the fact that you're able to you're able to clearly define each person's job within the commentary. So I think that's the easiest one to pull off, and it's always going to be the one that I think sounds the most polished when we first start out with Tricast. We follow that up with the single play-by-play, the pure play-by-play caster. It doesn't have to be pure. I think that sometimes it's good to maybe have a hybrid play-by-play caster here in this role that can match up with two analysis members. So if it's a pure play-by-play caster, essentially this person's covering the action, and then the other half of the commentary is split between two analysis casters. So part of the problem of this cast is that while it does feature the same kind of easy to execute ideas as the first one has, the problem with this one is you are actually breaking your time in half between two analysis casters. And we talked about before in Dota is the fact that there is a lot to break down, and these analysts won't always be able to go fully into what they want to talk about for the game just because it's moved so quickly and you're splitting your time in half. But it does provide, again, a very natural division where the play-by-play caster is calling the action, and then after the action is called, the analyst casters come in and they break down the game further, and maybe they talk amongst each other when the game is slow, and they can get really deep into the game if the game is actually a slow game. But in a more action-packed game, it ends up being more about dividing your time in half and just trying to get what little action you like, what little analysis you can as quick as you can, because you have to give the other commentator, the other analyst commentator, his room as well to be able to talk. So in my head, there are some, these two are very easy to execute, and they are the first Tricast. They're going to sound the most polished because of their natural division of roles. But I think that in order to really, if we really want to see Tricast further in Dota 2, we're going to have to get into some of these hybrid casts where you have a lot easier flow, and the back and forth I think is a lot more natural. So the first one I have is the play-by-play caster, a pure play-by-play caster, again, like Owen. What I'm going to be calling the glue. It's a hybrid caster, so the best example I can give would be myself, Gods, LD, and I think even Synderen is actually a potential hybrid caster because of the fact that he's able to carry on conversations really well, and is also able to dabble in some hype. So the idea behind the hybrid caster is that you share some of the roles of both, and this will just create a very natural flow to the game. So the play-by-play caster is calling the action. The hybrid caster can get in on that. He can actually help out with the action with some of the things that Synderen has originally done. This is the reason the Toby Synderen cast was always such a favorite of the Dota 2 scene, is that Synderen was able to provide both really good analysis as well as what I like to refer to as side hype, where Toby's calling the action, and then Synderen will also be able to come in and maybe it's just as simple as making a really loud oh shit, or something like that, or he's, oh, the black hole's coming, or something like that. It's something very small, but it can add to the hype as the other play-by-play caster is hyping it up. So the hybrid caster shares a little bit of that roles, maybe even after a natural breaking point in the play-by-play calling. There's still more action going in, the hybrid can pick that up. So when Toby and I were casting together in these Tricasts, if Toby was calling the mid lane action, but there was also a fight at top, as soon as his mid lane ended, I would try and pick it up and keep that hype rolling and cover the top action as well. What a lot of the hybrid caster is doing is essentially, this is why I refer to him as the glue, is that he is just, he is essentially keeping the whole entire cast together very naturally through flow. So when the play-by-play is done, the hybrid takes it over, and then he passes it over to, in this case, will be color commentator. So the idea being that the hybrid caster is also someone who can do analysis, but you are still able to have a color commentator to keep things light and funny, and if the game draws out, be able to just essentially fill air. The idea between these three being is that oftentimes the color is just using the hybrid and the play-by-play to bounce off of but doesn't necessarily need a whole lot of constant interaction with the hybrid caster or the play-by-play. I think this one has the most potential to be like the funniest cast you're going to need with any of these hybrid caster setups. You're going to need a lot of synergy between the 3 commentators that you have. It just has to be people who are friends essentially outside of the casting role and are, you know, have some history to fall back on. So that way you can actually have some really interesting, funny stories. If the game gets really slow, or maybe you even have a couple of pauses, this has the most potential to fill all the roles whilst and having really good flow while still being able to be really interesting no matter what is happening in the game. And then this last one, I think, is has the most potential when it comes to really important games. Games that you don't necessarily want to be able to have a color commentator, even if that color commentator, it might end up being, you know, nice to have if the games are really slow or something. You don't want it because it's a finals match or something, and it's just not natural to be joking around when there's so much hype behind the match itself. So this has the best potential to be something that fits our finals for maybe future tournaments, and will be ideally, I think it has the highest skill ceiling when it comes to casting. And that's actually how I look at it. I have to look at this. This is like easy mode Tricasting. This is medium, and these two are the harder roles. This is like expert level commentary, right? This is just an easy and simple way to kind of look at it. It has the highest skill ceiling, and it has the potential to be the most professional and the most professional sounding commentary that we could possibly have. The idea being, we have a play-by-play caster, again, another pure play-by-play caster like Owen or Toby. We have then the glue, such as Gods or myself, that is able to add to the play-by-play as well as still dabble into analysis. So we're going to be covering sort of the easy analysis in some ways, you know, the shallow analysis of what went wrong in that fight, or maybe even some basic level strategy of movement around the map. And then the analytical caster is there is to really delve deep. So people like Blitz or Merlini or Winter, those guys are a lot more straight. They're not able oftentimes to add to the hype like a hybrid caster would, but they are able to delve a lot deeper into the analytics. And that is something that I think Blitz and say Winter stand out quite a bit, is that they're able to break things down to really the next level. So oftentimes this is what our grand finals Tricast looked like for ESL 1 Manila. Was Toby was the pure play-by-play, which, you know, we had to really make sure that Toby covered the pure play-by-play and let me do my job as the hybrid, which was taking it from the play-by-play. And this is what I mean by flow, is that when the play-by-play caster goes up, when the natural emotion and even the pitch of the caster, it naturally goes up. He's talking about, oh my god, the black hole or something, right? And he goes up in his voice, and he's going up in excitement and all these sorts of things. You need to be able to catch that, right? You don't want to have a drop off. You don't want to be going up and then drop down with your analysis after the fight is over. A hybrid play-by-play caster will catch that energy and keep it going, and then naturally go down. So when he passes off to the analytical caster, in this case Blitz, so when I take it from the hype point where Toby's like, oh, and the fight's over, blah, blah, blah. I take it from there. I talk about the ramifications of that fight and how important it was, or what great plays it was, blah, blah, blah. It still has enough energy there, but we start dialing it down, and I go into, I essentially set up for Blitz, what are the ramifications? And then when you have downtime, then it just becomes a natural conversation between myself and Blitz, or the hybrid caster and the analytical caster. They're able to have just a natural back and forth between themselves when it's really slowed down, and delve really deeply into certain aspects of the game that the play-by-play caster won't be able to get it into a lot of times. Play-by-play caster is still able to get in there, ask some basic questions, but it's really up to the hybrid to be able to... You basically are a traffic light cop, is how I thought about it in my head. For when we were preparing for the TriCast, I had some ideas on how to make our TriCast better, and I developed hand signals for us. So Toby was on my left, Blitz was on my right, and in these scenarios, say where Blitz, when it had something he wanted to say, he would let me know. He would point out something on his screen or something, and I would say something, and I would wave Toby off. I would give him this hand signal. I would put it right next to his monitor. I'd be like, just, you know, hold out my hand. And it was to tell him, you know, like, don't say anything, don't respond to me. Even though it may be natural for you, don't respond, Blitz is going to pick this up. So I would set up something like an item choice or something like that. Or maybe, what is this smoke gang, you know, what is this smoke rotation supposed to give us? And that's that question directed to Blitz, and I would tell him, and I would tap him, and I would let him know, like, now's your time to be able to come in. And then when we had slower games, Blitz and I would talk things out, but you don't want to have too much this back and forth between just two people, because it is a TriCast after all, and you want to be able to create some flow to it. So I would tap Toby when it was time for him. You know, I would give him like a warning tap. I would be like, you know, hey, you got to think of something essentially to be able to say. It's not going to be the Toby and or the Cap and Blitz show. I would tap Toby and let him know, like, hey, you got to come up with something to say, and then I would pass it off to him, and he would have his opportunity to maybe get on and ask a question or something he doesn't understand about the game, or why certain decisions are being made, and it would create a very natural flow. I think the best example of that was game number 1 of the ESL 1 finals, which Liquid versus Wings. It was a rather slow game. I remember thinking that there wasn't a whole lot of action to it. There was a lot of strategic movement around the map, but we were able to constantly keep air. And that was the one big advantage of the TriCast, that even in certain dual casts like myself and Blitz, where we're able to delve really deeply into the analytics because we've talked so much about the game back and forth with each other, so we just kind of replay conversations we've had in the past offline. Even then, we wouldn't be able to fill up the air as naturally as we did in the TriCast, which is why I'm actually breaking this down, which is why I think that the TriCasts do have some merits to them, and we may want to see them more in professional tournaments. But I just kind of wanted to break that down. I'm not sure what you guys think about it. I would love to know any of your opinions about TriCasting, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, so I can maybe just be a little bit more informed, because I'm always looking at ways. It doesn't matter, dual cast, TriCast, solos, I'm always looking away at being able to improve, and your feedback is always going to be quite welcome. So let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you guys like this sort of vlog thing. I have a really hard time getting myself to do it because I oftentimes question whether or not anybody wants to listen to me talk about this sort of stuff. I don't have a whole lot of confidence when it comes to content creation, but I would love to know any of you guys' thoughts, and please subscribe to the channel because I'm putting out vlogs. I'm trying to create more content through YouTube to build up my personal brand, so it would be very much helpful if you guys shared this and subscribe to the channel.